Okay, so see if I can find my list of games somewhere around here. There it is. No. Dadgummit, where'd I put it? Not sure where I put that list. No, not Dodgers beat Cubs. What the hell? JS30 games, Dodger. Probably had a list somewhere. Oh, good. My own thing just came up. Thanks, YouTube. Let me just go to Bill Leonhardt. I think I sent him a message for that. Apparently not. Then I said it's like one of the lists, like 0 period or something like that. The list of the games. Maybe remember where I put that?
Was it the same one Bill was doing?
No.
I don't know that.
It's a bit
I
bigger.
don't remember seeing the links then.
It's all right. I'll find it momentarily. Gotta be in my history. Just wouldn't have thought I would close it, but apparently I was in a mass closing spree. Interesting that my history is telling me I have no history. I think that's improbable.
What is it you're looking
It was the 39 games or something like that, and it had a bunch of them on there in JavaScript. Oh no, it wasn't JavaScript. That's right. It was Python. That list was in Python. Python.
do it in JavaScript.
I was going to do it in JavaScript. Right. Yeah. Go.
Yeah, we really haven't learned enough in this course. I think we need to add on another. That's
That wasn't the damn list.
down to this.
Oh, 49, that's what it was. Here we go. And there's the book. Okay. All right, there we go. So description, several bad guys fall from the top of the screen. Let me turn on the video for that so you can see it now. Screen. Yeah, so it was 50 total, including our whack-a-mole. Okay. So the description of this one is several bad guys fall from the top of the screen and the user must avoid them. The player can be controlled with the arrow keys or more directly with the mouse. The longer the player lasts without being hit, the higher the score. So as I look at this little dude, the minimum viable product on it actually isn't having anything to do with the guys that are falling. First thing I got to do is I got to get something on screen and then able to move left or right or something like that. I might even include up and down, but at least left and right. So get my HTML. I basically just copied my HTML from my whack-a-mole game because it's effectively going to be the same thing, game area with some script files. I deferred loading on them just for shits and giggles. So my objects, if I'm going to do this OOP, are probably going to be, again, some master game object that will handle things like determining collision, scores, starting the game, and then the player object, which will be something like where it just moves that character left and right, or at least receives the moves, one way or the other. Actually, the game object might receive the moves because it actually kind of controls the body. If I were to have something where there were more than one thing I could move, or I could switch between things I'd move, I would definitely do the movement inside the game, not the player object. Like if I had multiple dogs, I could click on one and then use the keyboard to move him around. That determination of who would move would be from the game, not the dog. The dog would move, but the game would tell which dog to move. So I'm going to start with a basic constructor for our game. Now, something I've been not quite doing right all this time, apparently is a convention. It was a convention in PHP, but apparently it is also in JavaScript, is that when you are making a constructor, that the first letter of the constructor be capitalized. So, Roger game, and make my basic thing here, and then within that I can put a function player, or I'll do this dot player, but for right now I'll just do it as a local function, at least for the moment. So inside my Dodger game will be a player, and the player will be moving back and forth. So first thing I need to do is I need to know who my player is. I need to have a player in there. So I only have one, so I don't have to make an array. This dot current player is equal to null. Right now it's nothing. I haven't made the player yet. And then I'm going to need to make the player. So this dot create player, oops, equal to a function. I might give it a name or something like that, but for now, I'm just going to say this dot current player is equal to new player. So now I've made my player object inside my game object. I don't necessarily though want to start with create player, so I'm going to make a this dot initialize, and one of the things I'll do in there is this dot create player. Now I could, in my create player, I could have function. I'm going to have functionality for how it gets created. So, for example, I have some sort of representation of it on the DOM. Oh, also the Dodger game needs to know where it's going to put stuff too. So I'm going to pass that in. I'm going to put into initialize. I'm going to pass in the DOM element. I think I need to store that. I just put it equal to null to to show I'm not going to be storing it up there, or I'm not going to be setting it something up there. And then up here, I say this dot element is equal to, and I'm going to jQuery that sucker right from the start. Now in create player, I want it to add the player to the object, but I also want to add the player icon or whatever it's going to be to the game area. So first things first, I need to have a way to get that DOM element. So this dot create element is equal to a function. I also need to keep track of that one. So this dot, let's say, I'm going to name it differently so you guys don't get confused on which one's which. Put this here. And here, I'm going to make just a div of some sort. Oops, and I need to put an object in there for additional properties. And it'll have a class, let's say, of player avatar. Really, that's all I care about right now. There might be more things that it has, but right now I don't know about it. I might make, in some cases, a HTML skeleton, but since this is basically a div that's moving left and right, I'm not going to go so far just yet. I don't have nearly that much thing I could create that would require that. So I've got this div, but I'm not doing anything with it. So I'm going to have to say this dot player DOM element is equal to that. And then I'm going to return this dot player DOM element, because I need to return it to something else so I can put it in there. I don't want my player appending itself to the game area, because the player doesn't really know what the game area is. So it's going to return it back to whoever called it. Make sure you guys stop me if I am leaving any of you behind on anything. So up here in my create player for my, I'm going to put a comment here so you can see the difference. Player sub object. Oh, I really should have made this a repo too. Let me do that now before I get too much further ahead. Yeah. Because the player would never exist outside the game. Mm-hmm. It would be a global variable then. Yeah. But I want to be self-contained. I want to be compartmentalized as much as possible. So if I don't have to have something as a global space variable, then I don't. This is a pretty common practice in programming, at least JavaScript, is to encapsulate, even if you are just making a generic set of functions, you make an object to put that inside of, so that way it's not polluting the namespace with a bunch of different things. The more things you have that are publicly accessible by name, the more likelihood that you're going to have something overwrite your thing. So in our case, like if your master object gets overwritten, okay, well at least now everything's dead, not just part of it, and you know it won't work. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do get init to make this into a GitHub repository. I'm going to get add dot and get commit dash m initial commit of files with just a teensy amount of work because I am a dullard. Now I don't have a repo though to push this to, so I'm going to go to GitHub, and I'm going to make a new repository. So what did I call the rest of them? Like 0 period something other. 0 underscore period. Okay. 0 underscore period underscore Dodgers, or Dodger, I should say. And make it public. I'm not going to care about a README. I'm going to grab this address and come back to here and do get remote add origin and that address. Now, if I do get remote -v, I can see the addresses that it should push and fetch from. So I know it's going to the right place. So I can then do get push origin master. Now on this repository, there's our initial files. So if you want to follow along or you want to have the code in front of you, you can download that repo. It's zero period map Dodger. If you happen to be watching this from not in this classroom or you don't know what this is, go to LearningFuze on GitHub and you can find that at this address up here, learning-fuse 0_period_Dodger. Dodger, by the way, a nickname that I had through much of my school. And no, it had nothing to do with a favoritism of a particular sports team. Okay. No, I just had a proclivity for avoiding high-speed objects.
Oh.
Okay, so you asked that question, I answered that one, hopefully to your satisfaction. Okay. Okay. What do I need to do next? Oh, right, I'm returning the object. So I got my new player, and I'm going to then say this dot current player dot create element. Now that's returning something, so I really got to do something with that. So I'm going to say var player element is equal to this dot current player create element, and I'm going to append that. So I'm going to say this dot dom element dot append player element. And so theoretically, when I run this, I should get, this is Dodger. I should get if I inspect it, although I might not because I think I didn't actually initialize anything. No, there's game area and nothing in it. So I've got to go to a main.js and actually do something with all this. So now I could put this into a separate file, and in fact I normally would, but for not having to jump around files potentially confuse you guys, I won't do that this time. But in the future, I'll start breaking up my files based upon like their general purpose. So like for example, the Dodger game itself might have its own script file, and then the script file that then initializes the whole thing would be in a separate one. Var game is equal to null document dot ready initialize game function initialize game is equal to new Dodger game. Then game dot initialize all right, so let's see our sources. Come on, where are you? There's our main.js file. Make that a little bit bigger. And I'm going to put a breakpoint here. Okay, refresh. Creating our Dodger game. Then I'm going to go into initialize game, or initialize. It comes down to here. It sets our DOM element and then creates player, which goes down into here. which creates our new player, and then gets our DOM element, which we can see here is a div with a class of player avatar. And then it appends that element to our DOM element, finishes up, goes all the way up here, and we're out. So somewhere over here should be, theoretically, an element. But I think I gave it the wrong one. Actually, I didn't give it anything at all. So, yep, I didn't give it anything at all. So in initialize, I was supposed to give it the DOM element to attach it to. I really should have had an error check there. So for example, down here, if DOM element is equal to undefined, console.error must provide an element to attach gameplay to. So now when I do this, let this play, and I get an error now in my console that I have customly defined. There's also console.warn. Console.warn, console.error can only take one thing. So like, for example, in console.log, I can do several things. .log, hello, comma, goodbye, comma, adios. And it will do all three. But if I do console.error, hello, comma, goodbye, well, it does basically the same thing from that. If I did variables var a equals hi, var b equals hi, console.error a comma b. Oh, they changed it now. It used to be you couldn't do them together. Apparently now you can. Or at least in the console you can. All right, so console error, you must provide an element. So let's do that. Game area. Yep, that's it. Play that, and then look at our elements. And there's our player avatar div inside there. So let's give it some CSS so actually the stuff appears. So game area is, let's just give it full size, full width, 100 VW, height is 100 VH, and then let's make our player, or sorry, player avatar, height of, let's put it as 5V min, and width as 5V min. I'll put a background color of light green. And for now, this guy will just be a red square. So background dash ground dash color red. See that they're both coming up that color there. And there's our square. Okay, well, he doesn't really need to be up there. In fact, he's probably going to be in like one little segment down below. So the way I'm actually going to do this is, at least for this part, because he's not going to be kind of free roaming, I'm going to have a player area inside my game area. And then inside there, I'm just going to go back and forth between it like a Cylon, like ring, 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 ring. I know that was completely anachronistic for most of you. So I'm going to have some sort of player area, and its height is going to be something like, say, 30 VH. Say we have the bottom third of the screen. Actually, that's a bit much. I'm going to say 20. And just to see it a little bit better, I'm going to put a background color of pink. And then it's going to be position absolutely, and bottom 0 pixels. Means that my game area really needs to have position relative, or else we might get some weirdness if I start moving it around somewhere. So see where that appears. take off my breakpoint here. Play. I haven't actually added it to the HTML, so that would be handy. So I got to go back to here, go back to my game. Now, I don't know if I want to make the game area as part of the game area as part of the player, or sorry, the player area part of the player or part of the game. There's really only going to be one player area, even if for some reason there were multiple players. So I'm going to go with that there is only going to be the player area made by the game, not by the player. So I need this dot create player area. And then down here, I'm going to also make this dot player area DOM element is null, just in case I need to track it. And then this dot player area DOM element is equal to a div with a class of what do I call it? It's player area. And then I'm going to append it this dot DOM element dot append this dot player area DOM element. And then down here where I create the player, I really actually want the player to be inside that. So rather than appending it to the DOM element, I'm going to append it to the player area DOM element. So now it should be inside the game area is the player area, inside the player area is the player avatar itself. Okay, we got an error. This says cannot read property append of null on player area DOM element, so I might be doing something out of order. Okay, I haven't called the function yet, that's why. So in initialize, before I do create player, I need to do this dot create player area. Okay, well, that's not full width, so I'm going to have to change that. So width 100%. And I'm actually going to make the player area not 20 VH because I'll be breaking my own rules. I'm going to do 20%. I want it to not be VH because that way, if I wind up changing the game area, I don't have to then change the player area too. I want it to be just 20% of the available game area, which does mean that my player area, my player avatar right now is a fixed size of vmin. Could be a problem later on. I'm not going to worry about that right now, but later on I might need to. Okay, so there's our player down at the bottom. So he needs to be positioned absolute because we got to move him all over the place. So we might as well just do that now. Position absolute. And I need to attach in, first off, I need to get keyboard input in order to figure out what way it's going. So I want the game to do that. I don't want the player to be necessarily responsible for that. I want the game to receive the input. And then because it's controlling, like say, the game area or the body, and then I want it to pass the inputs into the player to tell it to go left, go right, go up, go down. That way, if I ever decide to add multiple things later on that are controlled by the keyboard, I don't have to go and attach individual handlers onto all of them. Although that could be a viable strategy too. So first I'm going to do is this dot attach keyboard handler, and that's going to be equal to a function. And what do I want to do? Well, by default, I want to focus the game area. So I'm going to do that. This dot DOM element dot focus, which theoretically should make it so now it receives all input. That may or may not work. I've never really tried that before, but we'll see. Focus is when, like, for example, in an input, you've clicked on it, that element has focus. Focus, or just like dot click would make something click, dot focus should make something focus, even though I've attached no event handlers to that. Then I want to do is this dot DOM element dot key press, key down, or key up. Now there's 3 different ones you can choose from. They each do something slightly different. I want to do Now there's going to be a slight interesting problem later on that we're not going to go into right now. It has to do with how keyboard presses happen. Right now, though, we'll just go for a literal interpretation. So the moment that the key is pressed, key moves. And then by holding it down, he'll keep moving. But because of the way the keyboard works, the first press and the second successive repeating press has a little bit of a delay in it. So I'm going to need to do something different later on. So the key press, I think it is. I'll make sure about that. I'm going to use on because that'll be a little bit more robust. Key press, function. I don't want to call function there. I want to call this dot handle key press. And then this dot handle key press is equal to a function. And inside there, I'm going to say just console.log a key was pressed, and I'm going to show you the event object inside that. Now, because I'm doing it this way, we'll have that same problem as before, where when an event happens, what does this get remapped to? Well, this inside there is what? You guys been following along or just snoozing? So this, no, this will not be the function. It will be the entire object. In object-oriented, when you use the new keyword, this will be the object that is instantiated from that constructor. However, with all event handlers, what will this be remapped to, Derek? Whichever DOM element. The next part. Which DOM element? That triggered the event. You have to be clear about that, not just any DOM element like the body or something, but which one triggered the event. So in this case, like say the game area would be returned. Well, we don't want that. We want to know what our object is still. So I'm going to bind this to this. That way I don't lose track of it. Refresh. Did I actually call attach keyboard handlers? Probably not. So this dot attach keyboard handlers. Refresh and oh, sorry. That's a screen moving. Okay, so it didn't work with the appropriate thing. It doesn't seem to be handling key press, so maybe I did that one wrong. Let's see now. jQuery key press. Yeah, it should be keep. Maybe it doesn't like it with caps. Let me try that with lowercase. Either it's not calling it or it's not attaching the right one. So I got to figure out where it's going wrong. So the first place I want to check is where I'm trying to attach the key handlers on. I'm going to do click right here, refresh it. Okay, now we're in that code. This .dom element is indeed the game area. And when I go down to here, It plays that one. I'm going to go then to my game area, and I'm going to check the event listeners. There's key press, and there's my function going to line 27. So if I look at my line 27, there's my handle key press. So oddly, I'm not seeing anything there. Let's follow it through. Go to sources, go to line 28, press a button. Hey, I'm not seeing a thing. So it's not calling it for some reason. I'm going to try taking off the bind just to make sure I'm not doing it wrong somehow. Even though it knew what to do, it knew which line to go to. Odd.
Don't you want to be? Don't you want this to be the div, not the game area? I'm confused why you're selecting the game area.
Why I'm selecting the game area? Oh, because keyboard input doesn't get received by a particular element. It's whatever one you happen to be on at the time. Like if you're an input, for example, it would receive the input. I'm going to try putting this on the body. First off, I'm going to get rid of this line just to make sure it's not screwing me up. And then I'm going to put it on directly on the body and see if that makes a difference.
So that's basically saying, like, if there's a key press on this page.
There it goes. Yeah, anywhere on the page.
Okay.
Theoretically, game area should have also did it even when I clicked on it,
Right.
but it wasn't quite working that way. So for the moment, I'm going to leave it as body, but I want to really come back to this and make this a little bit more robust. So set this to the game area. I could do it as the body, because the body will always be there. But I would like it to focus on the DOM element itself, so it isn't quite everything receiving it. But for now, we'll have to do it this way. I'm going to go put this back as bind, because I know I'll have to have that. Now, if I take off the console log, or sorry, the brakes, as I press, for example, I could use WASD as one of them, or I could use the arrow keys. But the arrow keys have a special meaning on there, so I might need to do something else with that to receive them. For right now, I'm going to use WASD. You can see down here the keyboard event, and it's the key S. And for example, the code that went with that letter. So I'm going to put it as.
Is that the same as key code? Because there's character code and then there's.
It can be the same. It depends on the operating system and such. There can be differences, though.
Okay.
The exact differences I'm not exactly certain of, but I know that it can come up to bite you, so you want to be wary of that. If I do a capital S, it's going to do lowercase s, oops, S, and a capital S. I do like that over here, code key S is the same for both, no matter which one I did. So if you look at the key code, that's 115 there, but the key code on this one is 83, but key S is the same. So whether I have it caps or not caps, it was key S for the code. So I'm going to use that for the moment. So I want to tell the player that it has received a movement key. So I'm going to tell the player this dot current player dot receive keyboard, or sorry, say keyboard handler. And I could pass the event to it, which might be a good thing, or I could just pass the key. I think I'm going to do is pass the event in. And then I could turn off that reception later on. Like when the game isn't running, I don't pass that instructions to the player. In fact, I'll do that right now. So this dot game is running equals true. And then down here, I'll say if game is running, it should be this dot game is running. And then do this. That way, it'll only pass along the keyboard commands to the player when the game is running. When the game is not running, like the game is ended or whatever, he won't be moving around even though the game is ended. All right, well, I got to have something in the player now to handle this. So I'm going to go down to the player here, and I'm going to put in this dot handle player, sorry, handle input, handle keyboard input, handle keyboard handler. Keyboard handler, go to a function, and I'm being passed in the keyboard event. And I'm going to say, okay, well, the var letter pressed or code, letter code is equal to key event dot code. And then I'm going to do something based upon that. So I really only have two possibilities I'm caring about, right? It's left and right, effectively. I might have more, though, like for like some sort of power up or explosion or up or down or something like that. So I'm going to put in a switch based off letter code. I didn't have to do it as a separate one, but for clarity's sake, I am. And then case, it was key S, so really I want A and D. And that was with a capital letter, so key A. Actually, that should be this. And handle left movement, whatever that's going to be, break. And case key D, and handle right movement and break. And I'm going to put in here a default console.log unknown input. I'm going to put this up here just to see it for the moment. Console.log left movement, console.log right movement, oops, movement. And now a key was pressed. It's not passing it in. A key was pressed. Where did I have that? A key was pressed. All right, so handle key press. Oh, it didn't actually do anything with it. How clever of me. That's attached keyboard handlers. That shouldn't be there. That should be down here. Right, in where I'm handling the key press. So refresh, left movement, right movement, and then anything else I put will be unknown input. I'm going to get rid of my superfluous console logs. No idea why you pressed that. Okay, so at least now we're receiving our keyboard commands. Well, now we have to move them left or right. So I'm going to put into this guy this dot move. And I'm going to potentially do this in a couple ways. Now, I could have, for example, a move function that receives an input, that, oh, sorry, a parameter that then says which way I want to move, or I could do it where I have like a move left and move right. But I really want to have a more generic function for this, and I could then have move left and move right, which would have additional functionality potentially. But so I'm going to say, like, say direction, And then over here, I'm going to move it over to the other segment. And I'm just going to straight up move its position. So I could animate it, but eventually that'll get problematic. So I'm going to take its current position. So I'm going to say var current position is equal to this dot player DOM element dot position, which is a jQuery function that gives me the left and the top coordinates. Actually, I might want offset, but let me see which one's which. I always forget. jQuery position. Get the current coordinates of the first element in the set of matched elements relative to its offset parent. So that's the one I want. That way, if for some reason I'm moving it just relative within the player area, not within the entire game board. If I did offset, it would give me the position of it in the entire page, not just in its parent. So I'm going to say that var new x is equal to current position dot x, because this function returns a object. Actually, not x, it's left. So you can see here, left, its position dot left is what it gets back from there. So I'm going to do left plus direction times, and then like however much I'm moving per movement step. So I'm going to put that into here. This dot player movement delta is equal to 10, for example. So every time I press the keyboard or it repeats, it's going to move by 10 pixels, theoretically. Delta just means the difference between things, so like difference between where I am now and where I will be. So just for clarity's sake, I'm going to put some parentheses there, and this dot player movement delta. And then up here, I'm going to say for keyboard A, that I'm going to call this dot move -1, and down here, this dot move 1. So if I'm moving left, it'll be -1 times 10. If I'm moving right, it'll be +1 times 10. And then I'm going to say that this dot player DOM element dot CSS left is new x plus the character px for pixels. So that'll take its current one, whatever it happens to be, find out where it is, and then say, okay, now your new left position is wherever you were plus or minus 10. Theoretically, assuming this doesn't all explode. All right, so I'm going to put some event handlers in here to trace it down, just to make sure. Handle key press, that'll be a good one. And I'm going to press D. Game is running, so current player keyboard handler event. I'm going to follow that through. Our keyboard event is indeed the entire event. We have been given key D. Do with that what you will. So the letter code is key D. Going down to here, we go down to the key D case, which says this move 1, which moved our guy by 10 pixels. So I'm going to turn off the breakpoints now, just to move them around a bit. If I hold it down, then he'll keep moving. But now there's a problem. Bye-bye. He can go off the screen. So I don't want that to happen. But I'm trying to figure out now, well, do I want the player responsible for making sure they don't go off the screen, or the game responsible for that? Well, the game's kind of responsible for the player area. So I think what I'll do, because for example, there could be an obstruction that I could add in later on that would prevent it from moving that the player would have no idea about. So I want to have a little bit of Mother May I in my movement process. Now, where do I want to put it, though? I think what I'll do is I'll have a check position, valid, invalid sort of thing on the game object. So I'm going to go up to here, and this dot check valid player position, and I'm going to be given. Now I could either check it before or after the movement. I can check it after the movement and then like bump it back, but I don't really like having to correct things that way. And now I got a couple of options here. I can either check just straight up numbers and see if it's valid, or I can be given the player object and then see. I kind of a quandary here. I think I like just being given the numbers and then saying whether that's valid or not. So I'm going to say position and probably that. So player position within player area. Just be more specific about what's checking in. I might then change it later on. Maybe I'll make it a little more generic because it could be like other objects and such. Check valid player position or valid player move. New position. There we go. Okay. So right now, one thing I have to check for is whether or not it's out of bounds of the available player area. And I don't want to be checking that over and over and over again. So I'm going to do that in my initialize, which is, I could go down to here and then say, like, for example, var min x is equal to 0, comma max x is equal to this dot player area element dot position dot left, for example, or no, sorry, not position, but width. And var min, well, y I don't care about right now, so I'm just gonna keep it to that. I could do that every time, but the width doesn't really change over and over again unless the screen size changes. So I might put in a function handler later on for when the screen changes size to recalculate it. But for now, I'm going to assume it's not going to change. And I'm going to put in up here, let's say like this dot player area stats is equal to an object. And then I'm going to put in this dot get player area stats is equal to a function. And then I'm going to say here, really I could have just set that to null probably, rather than making an object for no reason. And this player area stats, I'm going to say this dot player area stats is equal to this dot player area DOM element dot position for the left and the right in case I ever need that one. And then I'm going to say this dot player area stats dot width is equal to player area element dot width. And same thing for the height in case I need it later on. That way I'll have the left, the right, sorry, the left, the top, the height, and the width. I might even do things like generate the midpoint in case I need that for some reason, but right now I don't think I will, so I'll just keep it as is. So then I need to call this function somewhere along the line. So create player area, I'll do this dot get player area stats. So it's kind of making this initialize as my laundry list of things to do when the game first starts. Rather than having all my code in one section like that, I know, like, okay, first it creates the player area, then it gets the stats for it, then it creates the player, then it attaches the keyboard inputs. Makes it very clear. Okay, so back to check valid position. I'm going to say, well, if position dot left is less than 0, or position dot left is greater than this dot player area stats. I like actually not the thought of like the width and the height. I like thinking about the bounds, the left, the top, the right, and the bottom. So I'm going to change that slightly. So I'm going to change over here is rather than width, this is going to be the right and the bottom. I know my bounds.
Doesn't position need to be in property?
Where? Which one?
Display area stats equals position, line 27.
Line 27. Property?
Well, like right or bottom. Like display area stats dot position equals the position.
I'm not following. So I got line 27 here where it's this variable is equal to the jQuery method position, which will return left and top.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Yeah, and then I attach on right and bottom. So I let it fill in the first two for me, and then I put in the next two. Now, it's not just simply greater than player area.stats because my player is my position.left. If it's doing that, it would only prevent it from going past the end, but my box would still be already overlapping it by the width of the player itself. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Like, here's my edge, and right now I'm just checking to see as it goes this way if my box goes to here, because this one's left edge is hitting that edge here. But actually I need to stop it by the width of the. So I'm going to make a function down here, which is something like, say, this dot get player stats. And I'm going to return things like the same stuff, but for the player, the top, the bottom, the left, the right. So let's get some stats up there. This dot avatar stats is equal to null, and this dot avatar stats is equal to this dot player dom element dot position, and then same thing. This dot avatar stats dot width is equal to this dot player dom element dot width. And this dot avatar stats dot height is equal to this dot player dom element dot height. Now again, I don't necessarily want to just keep looking it up every time. It's not that bad of a thing, but it just makes me get hives when I'm that inefficient about it. So what I really want to do is have like a this dot set player stats is equal to a function. And then I'm going to put these guys into this. And down here, I'm going to just do a simple check to say if this dot avatar stats is equal to null, this dot set player stats, and then return this dot avatar stats. Now, this does mean that every time I'm doing an if conditional, which is also a little inefficient. There's actually a really interesting thing you can do for this. There's a name for it. I can't remember what it was. There's tons of weirdo names. Like I was recently learning about currying. I mean, like, really? Make me hungry? How dare you? I could do a function that then rewrites itself. So I can say this dot get player stats, this dot get continuing player stats equals function, and then that is return this thing. And then I can do right here is first off call that one, this dot get continuing player stats. But also then what I can do is say this dot get player stats is equal to this dot get continuing player stats. That. So effectively what I'm doing is I'm saying is once I've set them, never call this function again. Now forever onward into the future, my get player stats will point to my get continuing player stats. I will never do that conditional again past the first time. Does that make sense? I mean, probably not, because, okay, let's go through it. If so let's say we're in the very first call of this. Get player stats is called, right? We come down to there and we say, actually, we don't even need to put the if statement. We can just do this. Get the player stats, because we don't have them yet. Or set them, rather, I should say. So set them from the player object. Then I'm going to, actually, no, I got to do this then, rather than doing this. I'm going to do this down here. So return this dot avatar stats. Okay, so this is the, actually, you know what, the best way to probably do this is to just trace through it, and hopefully then you can see, but I'll explain it real quickly. Get player stats calls set player stats, which sets all the data, right? We're okay on that, everybody? Okay. Then I remap the very function that I'm in to a different function. Now, since I'm already in the function, I don't suddenly get transported to that function. But now every person that ever comes to that doorway now will go to the other function instead. There's those books that are over there, I read about it somewhere where you can do stuff like that. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess you could. Kind of the bad part about JavaScript in some ways, but I guess that's a good use of it.
Does that only work if you're assigning an anonymous function to a variable, or does it work?
You can remap a function name too, which older programmers would say, like, that's the worst part about JavaScript, is the ability to do that, because then you're not guaranteed of having the same function every time you call it. But, well, if you're going to dance with the devil, you might as well do the tango. So that is a legitimate use. That way, we never do a conditional, which never slows us down. But every time past the first time, we go and do something. Hey, Scott, something you might want to check out.
What's up?
I don't remember what they called it, but it's like basically like function remapping. So we're doing a little game where a guy, right now he's just moving left and right. So if I want to get the stats of like how tall, how wide the avatar is. Well, the first time I want to just fetch it right away. But every time after that, I don't want to fetch it. And I didn't want to do a check to see whether or not I had it. So after the initial one where I set the data, then I remap the function to a different function that only returns the data. So every time I'm calling get player stats, but in fact, the first time I actually do this function, the second time forever onward, I'm doing this function.
That's cool. Clever.
Yeah, they had some weird name for it. There was like, reoptimization or something like that. But
It's the re-optimization of the good Replex rotator cuff.
that's madness. So let's see if it explodes or not. So we needed that up here. Would you have a question?
I was just saying that's crazy.
Well, the thing about it, I mean, you can put a function to any variable.
Yeah.
Who say you can't put it to one that already exists. A lot of things that they do that are these patterns that we do in JavaScript were basically just people messing around with JavaScript trying to find interesting ways of doing things. And eventually those ways became canon and were incorporated into the base code. Yeah.
Line 32, at the very end, you need to put there.
Oh, I wasn't done with it.
Oh.
Yeah, I kind of like made a detour to fill in some functionality. I find that, at least for me, the difference between functional, like regular programming, procedural programming, and object-oriented is that object-oriented after a point feels like it's programming itself. Like I'm just the conduit through which it starts going. So it's like, oh, well, I need this. I go over there, make this, and come back. So what was your next?
I actually meant that this dot player area stats, would that be dot right?
Yeah, I haven't finished that yet. Because I realized I didn't have any. Well, I needed the size of the player, which means I had to get that. So, player area stats. My player area stats. I'm not, and at this point because I like I'm gonna say, okay, var player stats is equal to this dot current player dot get player stats, and then I'm gonna just see what I have because I'm not even certain at this point. And I don't know if I actually called check valid player movement. So, oh yeah, I did have it. So I need to go down to here to move. And then I'm going to find out what the new X will be. And then what I'm going to do is, now here's the problem, is I have that function now loaded into my game. My player doesn't know how to contact my game though. There's no caller that really works. At least none that I'm aware of right now. So when I first make the player, I'm going to pass in parent. To say this dot parent is equal to parent. And I, of course, have to do that when I make the player. So that's under create player. There it is. And I'm going to pass in this so it knows who's its daddy. And then down here, I can say if parent dot check valid player position. I'm going to pass in an object of like say left is new X. And if it is valid, then do this movement. So I'm actually going to put my breakpoint on this. That was 103. All right, so check valid player position. We're going to go into that. There's my other debugger statement that was basically superfluous. And I'm going to go to the current player and get player stats. So go into that. That goes into get player stats, which then goes into get set player stats. And we get our different stats. That seems right. So our avatar stats are height, left, top, and width. And then we come back to here, and now get player stats, if we go and map to it, is no longer going to here. It's now going to down here. So come back to here. We did get player stats. I need to do, didn't return anything, so couldn't do it. So we know that at least again, the data worked. So check player stats, check valid position. Let's uncomment this. And then say, if this dot player area stats, so that's where I want to stop before. Take off this breakpoint, do the movement, and then check my position. Left 10, player area stats is really, I'm looking for the right. The right from player area stats minus to get the player stats. So player stats, oh, we haven't gone there yet, that's why. So player stats of width. So player stats dot width. So that would be this dot player stats, let's check it off. This dot player area stats is that, so I want this dot player area stats dot right minus player stats dot dot width. It would give me 746, which I should allow. So this seems right. If I say if position dot left is greater than that, actually, I'm going to take out the if. That's false. So I should, if it was, should that be true or false? It's false because it's inbound, so it should return true because it's a valid position. So I might either want to reverse the if statement logic or just be happy that with this. So return true or return false, else return true. And really, I didn't even need to do that. I could have just returned the evaluation of that statement. And I think I will, actually. Return this. Return the evaluation of that statement. If it, and as I think that I need to do is reverse it. I want to make sure that I can do it. So greater than or equal to 0 and less than, and I didn't change this yet, minus width. So if it's inside this range, movement's good. And then coming back to my check valid. So if that, then allow the movement. Otherwise, I'm going to put here else console.log out of bounds. All right, so make sure it goes through once at least. Get player stats. Returning that. It was true, so it allows it. We move over, and away we go. And then I'm going to move one more to the right to show you that the function remapped. So now I'm going to come down here to get player stats. I'm going to go into it. And now look where we're at. Now we're at the new functions return statement, not the old one. we basically discarded the old one like a booster rocket. Now, if I wanted to reuse it again, for example, if I wanted to reuse that function later on, like maybe I needed to get it again, which I might have to do, I might have a get player stats entry point, and then I might call get initial stats and get continuing stats. And then once I do a initial stats, then I set the get player stats to get continuing stats. But then if the screen resizes, I call initial stats again to remap it in case it's changed. All right, so let's turn off the breakpoints and see if it'll stop us from going out of bounds. Out of bounds. And out of bounds. So I can't go out of bounds anymore. Okay, cool. What else? I think it's a good point to commit, definitely. So git add get commit dash m added initial area and player stats added movement and movement check code. Get push origin master. All right. So we've got a guy that moves left and right. Woo! It only took us an hour. Probably why most people go and use things like phaser, for example, for things like this. You know, just get all that easy stuff out of the way. Well, what do we need to do next? Well, we need to make things drop, which means we need to make something to drop. So dibs on Dallas. Okay, so I'm gonna do get checkout dash b add followers. Not to be confused with adding ballers. And then I'm gonna make a and I'm gonna have my function faller. I'll probably need the parent, I'm imagining. Now there are a few things in this that will be potentially stuff I want to reuse. Like creating element and other things that might be slightly similar. I'm not going to go into OOP inheritance just yet. And these are just like more comfy back there. That's one of the best chairs, by the way.
I didn't want to fall asleep.
Do I need to do more entertainment, song and a dance?
Okay, coffee.
Okay. This dot parent equal to parent. This dot element is equal to null. Now the thing is, I don't necessarily want to add all of these methods I'm about to add to this to the constructor, because there could be a lot of these things. And I don't want to waste memory like that. So I'm going to prototype them. I'm going to do it the more traditional way, and then later on, another time, we'll do like an internal prototyping way. Faller.prototype dot create element is equal to a function, and this dot Faller element is equal to a div with a class of follower object or something like that. And return. What else might I need? Doesn't have to do keyboard handler. It does have to move though. So faller.prototype.move is equal to function. And I'm going to do, it really just needs to fall over time and it isn't attached to a keyboard input. So I'm going to have to implement something that moves it over time. So I'm going to have this dot heartbeat is equal to null, or no, heartbeat timer. And also want faller.prototype.initialize. And we want something like a faller options. And I'm going to prototype one out of something like speed, size, like the width or something like that. Maybe the color or something like that, or additional classes. Additional classes. What else would it possibly want to be added to it? Like how fast it's falling, how big it is. Maybe there's some other additional type of movement. Like maybe it won't always fall straight down, but we'll get to that at some other point. So that means down here, I'm going to say that this dot options is equal to null, and then down here I'm going to say this dot options is equal to faller options, and then down here plus this dot options dot additional classes. That way, if I add like a green one or a red one or something like that, maybe even size might be superfluous. Maybe I just want to do it off of classes. I think I will actually. That way, the CSS monkeys can do the sizing of things. The speed. Well, this is going to be something like pixels per second, which means I need to sort of revamp it. So the speed, this dot options dot move delta is equal to this dot options dot speed, that's pixels per second, divided by this dot heartbeat intervals. Basically, I want to break down, I want to make it an easy to understand number for me to use, so like pixels per second. How far per second does it fall? But I'm not updating it once per second. I'm going to be updating it once for like 15 milliseconds or something like that. So I want to find out how many intervals there are of 15 milliseconds or whatever happens to be inside 1 second. So up here, I'm going to have this dot heartbeat intervals, and let's say that I'm going to do 30 milliseconds, 30 milliseconds. So if I'm moving 100 pixels per second divided by 30, that will give me 3 pixels per interval, roughly, I believe. Let's see about that.
So that should make the movement smoother, right?
Well, that won't in itself, but it will help us, yes. It'll help us get there. Divided by 30, so yeah, 3.33 pixels per 30 milliseconds. Or I'm going to say, rather than move, I'm going to call it fall, because that's really what it is. And in fall, I'm going to say that whatever its current position is, this dot faller element dot position dot top plus equals or plus whatever our movement speed is. So what do I call it? Oh, this dot options dot fall delta. And that's going to be going into, like, say, var new y. Right, so we just go and fall down. So I want fall to be called periodically. In this case, the number of milliseconds per heartbeat. My heartbeat is basically an update timer, basically saying how often do I want to update this thing asynchronously from any player action. And that's really the important part, asynchronously. That's, for example, why my asteroids game, the ship can move with the Newtonian physics, is that all my player movement is doing turn or add thrust, and then it moves autonomously from that. So I want faller.prototype.handle heartbeat. I like using this function because I guess maybe because it came from like more of a server thing where heartbeats were how we monitored the periodic progress of something. Handle heartbeat. And we're to call whatever we need to do every time. So for example, if this dot living alive or whatever alive this dot fall. Up here I need to put this dot living. I'm going to start off with is equal to true. Okay, so right now it's just going to keep falling forever. We'll fix that later on, but at least make it move. Could be a lot of stuff going on here that we haven't even tested at all yet. I'm trying to get a little bit lost because of that. Just like you guys can. So it sometimes helps just to like do something, test, do something, test, do something, test. So right now we're making this object. We're going to initialize it, which we haven't called that yet, which would make our options and call our fall delta. I probably also then want to start my heartbeat. So faller.prototype.start heartbeat. I don't want to do it. Apparently I do that in lowercase everywhere else, so I'm going to have to do that down here too. Start heartbeat equal to a function, and I'm going to say this dot heartbeat timer is equal to set interval, and then the function I'm going to call. So this dot handle heartbeat dot bind this, because set interval is called from the window. Therefore, we'll lose what this is. And comma, however long it's going to take, which is going to be our this dot heartbeat intervals. So every 30 milliseconds, we'll call handle heartbeat, an asynchronous operation that every 30 milliseconds updates the position of our falling object. Does that make sense? I know it might not make a lot of sense because it's like it's all kind of just floating in the ether in front of you. but we'll walk through the entire thing. So every 30 milliseconds, it calls handle heartbeat. And whenever it handles heartbeat, one of the things it does says, hey, am I alive? And if I am, fall. All right, let's try this. So first we got to do something up here to even do any of this. So I'm going to come up to here and say this dot create faller is equal to function. And maybe I'll give it some other thing like later on, like how many or where or something like that. But for now, I'll just start it off, which means I need to keep track of them. So this dot fallers is equal to an array because I'm going to have more than one. And this dot fallers dot push this so new. How do I want to do that one? I want to use it for some other thing. So I'm going to say var new faller is equal to new faller object, so faller. And I'm going to pass in this as a parent. And then down here, I'm going to push in new faller. Then I want to, yeah.
So when you're creating this for the new faller object, is this pointing to
The parent, the game object.
game object? Okay.
Yeah, I want to know who its parent is, so that way if it needs to communicate with a parent for certain things, it knows who to talk to. This dot faller dot push new faller, and then I guess then new faller dot initialize. And do I give it anything down here it needs to do? Faller options. So faller options. For now, I will initialize it with speed and additional classes. So speed is going to be, let's say it falls really slowly, 50 pixels per second. And additional classes, red faller. So it's going to be a red, it's going to be a certain size, or like red medium faller. This isn't a test. We probably wouldn't necessarily do it quite this hard-coded here. We'd probably randomize numbers, and we have to also determine where it starts. But that's not really something that the faller has to care about. Something we have to care about. So let's just get one of them on there. Initialize. Does that do anything down here? It sets the heartbeat, but it doesn't actually create elements and such. So I'm also going to do this dot create element, and I got to return that eventually. Means before that, this dot start heartbeat. So I'm going to set my options, start my heartbeat, make my element, and return it. Which might be a little bit like, maybe I don't want to quite do it that way, but I want to get it at least falling by the next 10 minutes or so. Okay. So where were we? Create faller. Okay. New faller initialize, and then we want to position it. So initialize is going to return it. So var faller DOM element is equal to that. And then I'm going to say faller DOM element dot, sorry, this dot name area, no, DOM element dot append faller DOM element. And I also want to position faller DOM element to be somewhere in the top. So I'm going to do just left 50 pixels. Left 50 pixels, and top 0 pixels. All right, we did a lot of code. Let's see how this explodes. Okay, no immediate syntax errors. That was nice. Yeah. Did I do anything to create a faller? No, not yet. So I'm actually going to do that manually right now. So in here, I'm going to say this, game dot create faller. Do I need to pass in anything? Nope, I don't. And I'm going to go to this dot create faller, put a breakpoint. All right, so we're making a new faller. We push it into our array, so now we have a one faller in our array. Do I need to make it bigger? That better?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm going to initialize it. So I'm going to go into that, make sure it works. My faller options are additional classes and speed. I'm going to find out my fall delta, which is going to be 1.66 pixels per time interval. I'm going to start my heartbeat, which then comes over here and sets interval. The heartbeat interval is 30. And the function I'm going to call is the handle heartbeat. I'm going to put a breakpoint in here for whenever that happens. And then I'm going to return create element. So I'm going to go into there. Yeah.
So just so I'm clear on this, so it's falling 1.66, repeating every 30 milliseconds?
Yes.
Okay.
Or it should.
Ideally.
Yeah, that's the goal. Return the element, come back to here, come back up to here. Our faller DOM element is now a faller object with red medium faller class on it. Sorry, so a faller class, faller object class, and a red medium faller class. It just set the pixels to it, and then it appends it to the DOM element. Now, of course, we have nothing on those classes yet, so nothing's going to show up there. Let me fix that real quick. Faller CSS. So we had faller object is position absolute. Top 0 pixels, left 0 pixels, and let's give it a height of, let's say, 10 vmin, a width of 10 vmin, and some sort of basic color. So background dash color black. And then for red medium faller, I want this to override, so it's going to come below it. That'll make it override because of what? Cascading, because it comes next. But if I wanted to be more sure of that, like if somehow it goes above it, I could also do this. Dot faller object dot medium, red medium faller. That way, if something has both those classes, this will be more specific and it will override even if it's above or below. Does that make sense? And in this one, I'm going to make the background dash color red. And let's say height is 15 vmin and width is 15 vmin. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to put this breakpoint further down here. And I'm going to initiate the code by doing my create faller. And it appends the DOM element. Oh, that's big. There's going to be a bruise coming. And now, notice how the next point we're at. What code are we in? Not really. I'm getting sort of towards the. What's the function that's in? Right. So it's saying, is this alive? And if so, then fall. So come down to here. Apparently it's not alive. Did I not set live? Oh, living. I did it twice. How very silly of me. Faller. Alive. Try that again. Play, and then it's alive. So fall, which didn't seem to do anything. Let's try that again. Play is alive. Go into this dot fall. New Y. So faller element is that thing. The top of it. Let's see what it is. Is 0, and then the fall delta is 1.66 pixels. So maybe it was moving, just moved 1.6 pixels. It's like that. It's like the Deadpool death by Zamboni. You're gonna die in 5 minutes. So I'm gonna take off the breakpoints temporarily and press play. And I don't see anything, so I'm going to go into this dot fall, and I'm going to say that. Oh, you know what? I can never actually change anything. So this dot faller element, faller DOM element, no, just faller element dot CSS top comma new Y plus pixels. No. Now they're just falling, right? But it's all in one place. We haven't told it to go randomly some other place. Also, they're never going away. So, but we'll cover that next time because we're out of time now. So get add get commit dash m added initial falling code need to put death code as well as randomizing falling. Get push or get branch, get push, origin, add fallers. Okay. All right, so that's it for this one. We'll do the next one on probably Tuesday.